Here's a Frank Turek video in which he misunderstands how information works.
Sometimes I run into this question or this argument against the teleological argument, which would be the puddle argument.
Yeah.
Which claims that the teleological argument, even though it has specifications that ultimately lead up to human life, it seems that through the puddle argument, it's more like it's just an appeal to pathos than it really is to any logic.
All right, explain what you mean by the puddle argument.
It's like saying, oh, I'm just here. I have every specification to be here. Therefore, I must have like a special reason to be here, and I must have a special cause to be here. And it's not really anything more than that.
The puddle argument is a reductio ad absurdum of the design argument. The design argument says that if the universe were slightly different, our biology, such as it is, would not be able to survive in it. Therefore, the universe must have been made specifically with us in mind. The puddle argument says that this is like a puddle looking at the hole in which it is sitting and thinking, this hole fits my shape perfectly. It must have been made specifically for me. This shows the backward reasoning of the design argument. The hole in which the puddle is sitting was not made to fit its shape. Rather, the puddle's shape conforms to the shape of the hole. Human biology is analogous to this. The universe was not made to fit our biology. Our biology was shaped to fit in this universe.
Well, I think if I understand the puddle argument, they're saying that the reason there's a puddle there is there's a hole in the ground and it's filled with water, and that's just the way it is, and we're kind of the same way. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, practically.
It's kind of like what we're doing is we see a target, we see an arrow in the wall, and we go up and draw a bullseye around it.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, I don't think that works for a number of reasons. One reason, obviously, is the universe had a beginning, and secondly, a fine-tuned beginning. And you can't make any puddle argument for that.
To infer that the beginning was fine-tuned is to use puddle reasoning. First of all, even though we can imagine the parameters of the universe being vastly different, that doesn't mean that these parameters were free to vary. We can't be sure that any tuning was necessary for the parameters to be what they are. They may be what they are due to necessity rather than chance or design. Secondly, even if they were free to vary, and any of the countless other sets of parameters we can imagine are just as likely as any other, it would only be an impressive coincidence that the universe has the parameters that allow sentient creatures to survive if we can safely assume that we cannot survive in many other sets of parameters. This assumption, however, is not very consistent with Frank's theology for a couple of reasons. One reason is that it assumes that Frank's God is incapable of creating sentient life in a universe with different parameters. It would mean that Frank's God is not omnipotent. Also, it would be inconsistent with the fact that Frank's God is himself purported to be a sentient being whose existence is not contingent upon the existence of a fine-tuned universe, because the existence of Frank's God is supposedly not contingent upon anything. God himself is a sentient being who does not require a fine-tuned universe in which to live. Some have argued that the universe is not fine-tuned for life, but rather for this God's preferences. God made the universe exactly this way not because he was unable to put us in any other universe, but because he just wanted us in this specific universe. However, because we have no way of knowing what this God had in mind, this claim is unfalsifiable and therefore meaningless.
Because nothing exists until the universe exists, nothing made of molecules anyway, and it's precisely fine-tuned. If it were changed any way, slightly, any one of those factors, slightly, nothing would exist or nothing livable would exist.
So Frank's God is not so omnipotent as to be able to create a form of life that exists in a universe that's even slightly different. But even if that's the case, that doesn't mean that he couldn't create people, if it is in fact true, as Frank's religion claims, that people are essentially immaterial souls. Even if Frank's God is not powerful enough to create biology in a universe any different from ours, he should still be able to create us if what we essentially are is souls. He shouldn't need a fine-tuned universe.
Okay, so there appears to be intelligence behind the universe. Secondly, the genome that we mentioned earlier, the 3.2 billion letter genome, is like a software program. If you're walking along the beach and you see in the sand, John loves Mary, you don't go, gee, the waves made that. Or the crabs came out of the water and made that message in the sand, right? You know immediately that that message must be the product of a mind.
I would infer that because minds are the mechanisms that can most probably create such a message. However, that's not the case with DNA. We know of chemical mechanisms that can build genes with very orderly consequences through the unintelligent processes of mutation and natural selection.
In all our prior experience, messages always come from minds. Now that's just a few letters long or a couple of words long. But imagine a message 3.2 billion letters long in every one of our cells.
DNA is not a message. Messages by definition deliberately convey information. DNA unintelligently stores and propagates information. Information can be created and propagated without the involvement of consciousness, even if it is very complex. Information is simply a non-random pattern.
If John Loves Mary requires a message, a messenger, a mind, then a software program 3.2 billion letters long also seems to require a mind, a great mind, to create.
While shapes in the sand resembling the letters John Loves Mary do not, strictly speaking, require a mind. If I had never seen letters before and didn't know that they were human inventions, I would have no reason to infer that they were put there by a mind. A mind is simply the most probable explanation in the absence of any other mechanism that can unintelligently create those shapes. But again, this is not the case with genes. We know the mechanisms by which genes are built, and those mechanisms do not look like they need intelligence at all.
And look, atheists can get rid of the argument from information in DNA by simply answering this question: what natural laws can create messages?
Again, Frank seems to be conflating information and messages. If what Frank means is what natural laws can create information, then I can give an example. The example I frequently give is a rock falling into some mud. When a rock falls into some mud, the indentation it leaves in the mud won't have a random shape. It will be a shape that copies the shape of the rock. If that rock gets moved from that spot in the mud will retain information about the rock that was there. If Frank wants to conflate information with messages, then we could indulge him and say that the shape of the indentation in the mud is a message about the shape of the rock that was in there.
There's only 4 known natural forces: gravity, the strong and weak nuclear forces, and electromagnetism, light. Which one of those 4, or combination thereof, can create a software program? The answer is none of them.
The only way a software program is analogous to a genome is that they are both patterns that have consequences that reflect those patterns. But the shape of a rock, when it falls into some mud, is the same in that regard. Just as DNA shapes the body it inhabits, the rock shapes the mud it falls into. From the standpoint of information, these two events are fundamentally the same. And just as the shape of the rock is not random, but rather the consequence of the patterns of erosion, sedimentation, and/or accretion, DNA is the product of mutation and natural selection. To bring us back to the puddle analogy, the shape of a puddle is also information. It is non-random. It is determined by the shape of the hole in which it sits. One could say that the shape of the puddle is software that is programmed by the shape of the hole in which it sits. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.